So today, well, let me just introduce myself. So I'm going to start with just a brief introduction and then kind of get into the meat of my talk. So I work as an executive in a startup at Decide.com. If you're not familiar with what we do, it's my little company plug, but we help consumers decide what to buy and when to buy it by using data from all over the web and distilling it down to an easy-to-understand recommendation. But I'm not really here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about how to work with technologists. And this is a topic that's really close to my heart because I started out my career as a developer. And about 7 years ago, I moved into management. And now, more recently, as an executive in a startup, my primary job is just to bridge the gap between all the business units, the rest of the company, and technology. So hopefully I have some good, interesting insights for all of you. But first, I'd love a show of hands in the audience. How many people would consider their jobs to be a software engineer, or programmer, or developer? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, one. Okay, that's good. But this may not be as interesting for you, but hopefully everyone else will find it insightful. So first, think about success. As you think about your future, what does success look like for you and your business? If you're going to fast forward, what will your traffic be like to your website, or maybe your revenue? How are you defining achievement and success? Right? Now that you have that in your mind about the future, think about today, and imagine that there's a competitor that just came onto the market, and they're exactly where you are. They have similar staffing, similar resources, similar product, and similar traction in the market. So if you look out to your success in the future, let's say a year, what is it that is going to make you more successful than them? What are the sort of things or opportunities that you're going to be able to realize that's going to leapfrog ahead of the competition and help you realize that success? I don't know exactly what you're thinking because I don't have ESP, but I can tell you, or guess, that it's probably about execution. It's about teamwork. It's about being able to exploit opportunities and synergies that exist in the team and company that you have today. And this really gets down to the importance of working with engineers. Because if you work in a technology company, there's a lot of different pieces that need to come together to formulate success. And they're not all silos. If you're in marketing or creative or product or even engineering, you have to come together to get success. But that's okay, because there's a lot of power in teams. I think in 2010, the New Orleans Saints, to use a sports analogy for the sports fans in the crowd, they were huge underdogs at the start of the season, but they continued to win all the way to the Super Bowl because as a team, even though on paper, each of the players, their stats weren't as good or they weren't as strong, because they banded together and worked, they had great success. And this is also true in companies. The problem is, if you talk to a lot of startups, there's this very pervasive attitude. And as I was doing research for this talk, I talked with a lot of people. And one of the things I kept hearing over and over was this us versus them attitude, that people felt like because they worked really closely or were more similar to their colleagues, that they were the us and someone else was the them. And there's a problem with this because it's very then hard to realize those same efforts of being one team. And so this brings me to the point of my talk, which is, taking a play off the title of Engineer Whispering. It's really about conversations with engineers. So I'm going to go through some of the things that you may think, some of the things that you may have said, or even just things that you've experienced when talking to them. But let's start with our reputation. So if you can just yell out, what are some things you think of around the stereotypical engineers? Just go ahead and yell something. Introvert, that's a good one. What else? Arrogance, that's another good one. A lot of engineers think they can do their jobs better than the people doing them. What else do we have? There's got to be more. Antisocial, there's another. And there's a lot of things, and they're not very good, right? When I was doing my talk, I came up with those, and moody and grumpy. They say no all the time. They're pedantic about details. And the thing about reputations is that, while they may not always be true for everyone, they're earned based on experience. And this is unfortunate for many of us, but we're really just like everyone else. And the key to working with us and working well with us is to know that we want to work with other great people too. And so just like you and everyone else, we want to work with people who are smart, who are goal-oriented, and are focused on being a key team member. So think about a person or a coworker that you really loved working with. What was it about them that you liked? For me, the things that come to my mind are someone that I can learn a lot from, almost like a mentor, a person that when things went wrong, like when I made a mistake, they lifted me up and helped me overcome it. These are the sort of things that people want, right? And I really feel like it comes down to 3 things that makes a person truly awesome at work. And these are the same no matter if you're a technologist or not. The first one is that you're awesome at your job, right? You've got to be great at what you do. You have to master your craft and be able to deliver consistently. The second thing is you've got to be positive. While people can enjoy commiserating now and then, no one really wants to be around a little black rain cloud. People really want to work with other people that make them feel good and that lift them up. And finally, you've got to be a team player. This means thinking about the group more than yourself. It means taking the time to understand the perspective of others. And it also means that you're acting like a team player, and so when the going gets tough, you're willing to man the rowboat. And so all these things matter as being part of a team. But when you work with technologists, it really starts with you. And you might say things or do things or have perceptions, and so I'm here to kind of help abolish some of those, but also help you to see what it looks like from the other side of the fence, having been doing both for a while. And one of the first ones that came to my mind was that people are always like, here's a spec, just build it. And it always really cuts me to my soul, because as an engineer, we're not builders. We like to create. But I have this theory that people see our work differently than they see anyone else's work, and that our job is just to take what the product manager has dreamed up and the designer has articulated into a vision. Our job is just to build it. But it's not that simple. Building is what you do with IKEA furniture. You get all the pieces out, you lay them out, you get the instructions, and you assemble it together, and you've got your cheap table. That's not what we do. We start with a blank editor, and we write our code, and it's like a masterpiece. You can ask 5 different engineers to solve the same problem, and you'll end up with 5 different solutions. And because of that, this creating is really important to us. The reason we started to write code was that at some point, when we learned programming, we realized that it was something that we could do and we could create, and we got this excitement about building. Well, not building, creating, sorry. And every single engineer fell in love with it because they were able to make something small and useful early on in their careers. And we want to work somewhere where our insights and our ability to create are appreciated. And so my first kind of key lesson to all of you is you've got to involve us early. Everyone knows that no one really likes having designs and specs just thrown over a wall. But in order to get really good ideas, or even just make smart trade-offs, like knowing where you can take a shortcut, and what is pragmatic and what isn't, and how to solve a problem, the key is asking and soliciting people's advice early in the process. The thing about soliciting our ideas, though, if you go to the introvert stereotype, meetings and maybe the traditional forums that you're using may not be the best. If you're an introvert and you're shy and you're not used to being involved in product meetings, perhaps, sitting in a big group of people is not necessarily the most welcome forum to share your ideas. So if you have these type of people, think about a different medium. Try one-on-one meetings or smaller groups. And at Decide, we recently started using Yammer, and we would post the designs, and people would have a threaded discussion about them. And this was really powerful because people who would never speak up in meetings, or maybe would never even attend the meetings, had really insightful and interesting things to say. And the moral really is that it's about collaboration, right? That's part of being a team player and working as a team. But even if you're collaborating, it's possible that you're going to run into saying no. People say that engineers say no a lot. And the thing is, there's a lot of reasons that we say no. It could be that we don't want, the feature is too big, or updating the code is very difficult, or it's additional scope, or it's revisions to additional scope, or even additional scope that's added in at the last minute. There's many different reasons. But if you hear no, the first thing that you need to do is actually understand what they're saying no to. As I was talking to a lot of people when I was doing my research for this talk, one of the things I heard over and over was that a lot of the time they say no, but it's because people don't really understand the ask. And several years ago, I was managing an engineering team, and we were working with a marketing team, and they wanted to do this promotion that involved a coupon code. Well, the engineer who had kind of been working with them to do the estimates had estimated this huge timeline, because in his mind, he had to create this whole coupon code generator sort of thing, but all they needed was a one-time coupon code. And getting clarity around that definition allowed us to cut the scope from a month to less than a day, making it much more feasible for the business. And this is because when you think about these things, each person comes from a different frame of reference. And this is really important because as an engineer, we don't get to just build something once and then it goes away. And moreover, if we feel like we have to do something one time, we might have to do it again in the future. We may spend a little more time to make it easier and automate it. And if you understand that everyone's looking at the problem differently and potentially optimizing for different metrics, you can then adjust and handle those different motivations. So as a stakeholder or someone working with engineers, one of the best things you can do is really bring clarity to the situation. Ask the technologists, are you guys worried about potential risks with this feature? Is everyone thinking about the problem in the same way? Are they more worried about speed and quality versus traffic and business revenue? Getting to the heart of what each person is optimizing for can ensure that you're on the same page. And one of my favorite techniques for doing this, and I use this in a lot of different ways actually, is to ask why 5 times, or 5 ways. And I don't mean just asking why, because that would be annoying, but asking good questions to get to the heart of what's really going on. So, is there something that you think works better? Is there something wrong with what I'm asking? Are there other priorities that are standing in the way from you saying yes? Are there solutions that we aren't considering? Analyze the problem. And even just, can I help, or is there someone else who I can? All of those questions can help you get insight into why they're really saying no. And even if you do all this, though, the person may still say no. And the reason why is that a lot of people have a negativity bias. Our ancestors were cavemen, and by noticing things that weren't right in their environment, such as a potential predator or things that didn't look okay, allowed them to survive. And your mind, the primitive part of your mind in neuroscience, it actually reacts stronger to negative stimulus. And so if you will ask a question, people's gut feeling is almost always no. And then as a technologist, one of the things is that the better you are at seeing flaws or problems or risks, the better you are at your job. Because you're able to find bottlenecks. You're able to diagnose problems in the code. These are all things that make you better at your job, and so your gut feeling almost all the time is to point out the problems with ideas and the reasons things can't be done or are difficult to be done. And so if you know this bias exists, you can help them. And the best way is to reframe the problem. And this is understanding what matters to them. What are the things that their team is optimizing for and what they need to be successful? What are they trying to learn, or what do they enjoy doing? And if somehow you can create your request in a way that emphasizes what's important to them, it can make it a lot more likely to turn a no into a yes. And ultimately, this is really just about seeking resolution based on interests and goals, not specifically their position. And this removes the defensiveness and hopefully negative bias out of the conversation. One of the best ways of doing this is to actually have them teach you. A lot of people are afraid to say they don't know, but if you work together to come up with a solution, then they can feel more bought in, the engineers, into what they're doing, and you can help them collaborate. And together, you can come up with solutions which engages everyone and hopefully will result in better products and business. And at the end of the day, the key really in all of this is that if you take the time to understand their perspective, it will improve your relationship. But the thing about relationships and these things, and even if you're doing all of this stuff, is that timing often can become an issue. Idle engineers seem to be one of the worst things in business, and if people hear about engineers not working on something, it's almost like sacrilege. And they find things just to keep them busy. But the problem is that this can be very difficult because only in software are you expected to start your work without doing something, without having a clear plan of what you have to build. For example, imagine that you had this plot of land, and you wanted to hire a builder to build a house on it for you. And you were really excited, and he comes to you, and he has this drawing on a napkin. He's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start laying the foundation. And you said, wait. I don't even know if this is going to be 2 stories or 3 stories yet. And they're like, oh, don't worry, we're going to get it. It's okay, we'll just build it, and we can always add it on later. This isn't a good feeling, right? But in software, we do this all the time. And there's often major holes in the requirements. And I'm sure many of you have seen this sort of diagram before. And what happens is because you do have limited time and engineers need to get started early, a lot of what ends up getting built may or may not be needed. And a large portion of the stuff that is needed, we didn't anticipate and will have to be done at the end. And so I also think this is a great chart, which really shows what tends to happen in a project, where you have the over-engineering in the upper quadrant, and projects tend to start on one side and trend down into the other as the time progresses. But by having obsessive focus on simplicity and quality, you can get really great results. And so that's what I think does well with teams, when you can really distill features down to simple, high quality, and then implement those well. But at the end of the day, for us, programming is our craft. The problem with waiting till the last minute is that we're always rushing to get everything done. And the problem with software is that it's more than just building it one time. It's like if you do a design, you don't always have to support it. But for us, if we take a shortcut or make a mistake, it's our phones that ring in the middle of the night on Fridays or in the middle of the day on Saturdays, and we have to interrupt our weekends to go and take care of things. And this is also hard when people always assume that we work weekends. This is a statement that people often ask, and we do work a lot of weekends because we do sometimes are on call and have to support the software that we write. But you'd be amazed at how many of us will go over and above to do things for you. There's just one key that you need to use, is that you've got to tell us why. Engineers, we're happiest when we have a purpose, when we know that people are benefiting from our hard efforts. So you explain why. If you're getting pushback on fit and finish, and people feel like that, and the engineers are saying this work seems unnecessary, don't just simply ask for the touch-ups. Tell them why. Tell them how that these minute details can really have a positive reaction on the customer experience. These sort of justifications can help make your case and help bridge that gap and give people a reason to go over and above. Another thing you hear a lot with timing is just add more engineers. And I always love the saying that 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month. And it's really true. Sometimes adding more people to the project can actually slow things down and make it worse with the communication overhead. But moreover, and one thing that you may not realize, is that people are specialized. On any engineering team, just because you know your whole team is writing Java or your whole team is writing Ruby, that doesn't mean that everyone knows every part of the system. There are people that become experts and really good at certain slices or areas of expertise. And so it's not as simple as just interchanging one person for another. And so getting involved in the process can help you make sure that what you're asking for actually makes sense. And it also helps them feel important that you're taking the time to understand what we're working on. But moreover, this interchangeability also emphasizes the fact that what one person's estimate isn't necessarily another person's. There can be a lot of different parts around understanding the problem and knowing what you need to do to make it work. And a lot of people have this conundrum where someone thinks it should take a certain amount of time and it doesn't. And at the end of the day, estimates are kind of evil. Because no matter how hard you try, it's very hard to get them right because there can be bugs, there can be distractions. You may have woke up in the middle of the night to get up and fix a problem and then just be too tired to think well and get your work done the next day. And of course, none of this takes into account all the learning you have to do when you start in a new system. And the other reason that estimates are kind of bad is that engineers have a tragic flaw. We constantly overestimate our knowledge and our abilities. And this means that even though we want to be optimistic and hope for the best, we often end up having to work a lot of extra time to make the estimates that we committed to. And the other thing is that we feel like no matter what we say, it will always be considered too long. And we want to make everybody happy, and we want to get our products out there fast too, so this becomes very frustrating. And then at the end of projects, because we've made these bad estimates and we're working overtime, we have additional scope, and then on top of that, you say, let's just slip the date and add this more additional functionality in. And this drives us crazy. And the reason why is not just because we love seeing our stuff in front of people and we want to have our work into customers sooner rather than later. It's also because every time we add more stuff to our releases or our launches, it creates additional risk. Because when something goes wrong, if you've deployed 10 things, it can be one of the 10, whereas if you've only deployed 2, it's a lot more easy to troubleshoot and understand where that problem lies. And so we like to keep things small and more iterative. But if this does happen, the most important thing that you can do is think about the progress. So think back in your experience. When was the last time that you, or even anyone you know, achieved a truly enormous breakthrough solving a really hard problem, or really achieved one of those big, audacious goals that everyone talks about? I don't know about you, but it's pretty hard because people don't make these breakthroughs all the time. But you know what does happen all the time? Small wins, progress. And so what you can do is show progress. My friend Jessica and I were talking about this the other day. It's called the progress principle. And there was a doctor, Dr. Amabil, who did research where she had 230 plus professionals keep journals every day for several months. And then they analyzed the results of these journals. And they found that people found the most meaning and happiness in their work when they were able to show progress, even if it was something small, like fixing a bug or helping someone else. And I know as a manager myself, I often forget how important recognizing progress and small wins are for the people on my team. And so I want to tell all of you that it's really important that as you think about these things and as you work with other people and you're making these requests, help them see what good things that they're doing and show these progress and small wins. And the best way to do that for all of you, I think, is to show them a before and after. If you are in like a marketing team here, I'm sure you have a lot of metrics. Anything online seems to be very metrics driven these days. And one of the best things you can do for engineers is show them the power and value of their work. How did that email template, what was the open rate? What was the click-through rate? Was it higher than normal or not? Show them the results. Did that new feature they build, is it increasing customer engagement? if you can show them, it gives us a purpose and helps us see the real value that we're bringing to the business and our customers. In all of this, I actually have a secret to tell all of you. As an engineer, we actually don't know what you do. We have no clue how you spend your days. And this really was hit home for me several years ago. I was working at an early stage startup, and we had built the best product on the market. But we were largely just technology and product people. We didn't have a lot of sales and marketing experience. And we thought we could figure it out. And the company ended up not realizing the success that it could have, largely because we didn't really understand the value of sales and marketing. We didn't know what that meant. And what that taught me was to value that. So then, subsequent years, I went to work at a marketing software company. And I learned a lot about what good marketers actually do. And when I find myself going into different technology companies or talking to other CTOs or engineers, you'd be amazed at people who actually don't have any idea what is going on with marketing, how people are spending their time. And this can be really, and maybe this is a little less true for product and design, but one of the greatest things you can do is help educate them, help people understand what is the value that you're bringing to the organization. So how do you do this? Well, it's actually quite hard. Because if you think about it, if you think about your boss and the people that you're working with, it's very hard to judge value, even based on results. Because the better you are at your job, and the more autonomy you have and less oversight, the less anyone actually knows what you do. And this was a more recent realization for me about a year ago when I was really looking to try and understand what an employee of mine had really been doing. And I realized that even if I looked at the work, I couldn't tell how many hours they spent on it. Was it something easy or hard? I mean, look at a design. How do you know how much thought has gone into it versus they just designed something? It's very, very difficult. And so if no one knows what you're doing all day, then how do you help other people know? How do you make this happen? Well, it really comes down to trust. And this is kind of a scary concept because how many people necessarily are sitting in here and are like, I love my boss and trust them completely? Hopefully people do, but I would say that's not necessarily a common feeling. But moreover, it's not just about trust between you and your boss. It's actually trust with everyone in your organization. So I like to think of trust as a graph. And every person that you work with, every person you have relationships with, these are people that will have an opinion of you. They'll have an opinion of your value. There's someone that you can talk to. And so it's really about championing yourself among all these different areas, cross-discipline, not just with your team, but you've got to find supporters in the organization and build those relationships. And a great way to do that, if you're talking about engineers, is to use the same tools. So what do I mean? How does your engineering team work? How do they track their progress? A VP of marketing at SEO when I was there, he had this genius idea, and I don't think he realized the benefit of it. You see, we did Agile, and we had a big board with Post-it notes on it to track all the engineering work, and he started doing the same thing for marketing. And his marketing team would have daily stand-ups or scrums, just like we did in engineering. And his was, I think, more just to adopt a better way of tracking the work and getting things done and accountability, but it had a side effect that every engineer then felt like there was progress getting made in the marketing, and they could go and look at the wall and see what the marketing team was doing. And this was really useful because it allowed people to actively track and collaborate in the same visual systems that were being used across the company. So let's say you're collaborating and you're working together. Another problem that people have is that they'll ask questions and they really aren't satisfied with the answers, or they don't get an answer, or they don't understand the answers. And this can happen a lot because sometimes technologists will throw around all sorts of fun acronyms and concepts or systems, and it's not always obvious what they're talking about. The most important thing that I can say to you is that you've got to ask. It doesn't matter if you're asking a dumb question like, does the weather affect the cloud? Although don't ask that. But even just how you're using the cloud can be an interesting question, because you will do your job better if you understand the technology that is underlying and working and running your company. And you have the right to know. People don't always want to explain themselves, but if you don't ask the dumb questions, then you're not necessarily going to understand. And if you're not comfortable asking in meetings, you can take someone aside. You don't have to say it in a bigger forum. Learning to speak our language and ask us questions and being able to communicate with us, I think, is really important. Us engineers tend to be very detail-oriented. We like math, we like numbers. So being specific and understanding how to communicate with us can help ensure that you're going to get the right thing done. And so ask. And if you're not sure, ask for clarification. And what I'm really getting at here is that you've got to be able to learn both sides. Learning a bit about technology can help you. And I'm not going to stand up here and advocate you should learn to write code, because I know there are people who do say that, but I think you should learn what code can do. How can learning the technology extend your expertise and make you even better at what you're doing? Because if you're working in a technology company, I can't imagine it wouldn't help you. And if you need help or you're not sure, you have people that you're not comfortable asking questions, find a tech mentor. And it doesn't have to be in your company or your team, but find someone who you are comfortable asking questions with, who will sit with you and give you good advice and can be that sounding board for you. And when it comes to asking for help, I'm going to give you 4 tips, because I do think that technologists are a little bit different than a lot of people. The first one is make sure you pay attention to when you ask for help, and don't expect an answer right then. And the main reason is that for us, context switching is really costly. A few weeks ago, I got to spend a week or two working, writing code again, and it was so fun. But one of the things I noticed was that it took me a good 2 hours before I reached my peak productivity. So I was most productive from hours like 3 to 5, right? That's like most of a day. And so if you interrupt us, it's very hard, because that context switch can be really painful. And so be cognizant of how people do their work and consider it when you want their help and attention. Another thing, and this kind of comes back to giving them a purpose, but tell them why you want to know. Tell them that you're trying to get more technical and you want more experience, and they'll hopefully be more inclined to help you. The other thing is, when they do help you, pay attention. This means don't be multitasking and doing email on your cell phone. Actually make an effort to hear what they have to say and show them respect by really trying to understand and engaging. And after they help, make sure, even if it wasn't the most helpful, that you say thanks. Take them to lunch or coffee, or offer to repay the favor. Be appreciative so they'll be willing to help you again in the future. Finally, you're asking for all this stuff and you're asking for help. You've got to be nice about how you ask for features. When I was working a few years ago, I was working with a sales team. And there were 2 salesmen, and they couldn't be more different than one another in terms of style. I would walk into a meeting, and one of them would say, I can't make my numbers, I can't do this deal because engineering hasn't done this feature. And my initial reaction managing engineering was like a defensive wall. Like, of course, well, you didn't, it was so frustrating. But then the other guy had a totally different approach. He would go and meet with the members of my team, taking them to coffee. And he'd come into the meeting and say, I talked with them, and there's 3 different ways I think we could solve this problem. And if we go with number 2, we can get it into this sprint. And my job was done for me. There was no way I could say no when those type of requests were made. And so it's really about how you ask. And this comes down to making connections. It comes down with treating people, not like cogs or a separate style, like doing away with that us versus them mentality. And really, it's about making other people feel important. And there's 3 keys, and one of my favorite lessons that I've heard was that if you imagine every person that you meet, engineer or not, with a big sign around their neck that says, I want to feel important, I think it's an important lesson so that when you talk to them, you're present. You're not on your phone, you're making eye contact, and you're actually really listening to what they have to say. You're asking questions. A lot of engineers are introverts, But moreover, they like to think through what they say. I often talk about different communication styles at work. I'm the type of person where every single thing I say that comes out of my mouth is a rough draft. So I usually have to say 10 things before I've actually found the one that I really wanted to say. But then there are people that are the opposite, where they actually think through all the scenarios before they say anything, and everything they say is a final draft. And so it's really important that with those type of people that you ask the question and that you wait. You leverage silence and actually let them respond with what they have to say and consider it before just replying. And this means don't interrupt. So if you're like me and you're very wordy, hold your tongue. So let's do a quick exercise about your coworkers because connections are really important. So in your head, make a list of the people that you have the best relationships with work. Maybe they're your teammates, the people that you communicate with a lot, the people who you spend time with. Okay, do you have 2 or 3? All right, now make a second list. Who are the most important people in your organization? Who are the people who get things done? The decision makers, the ones that are the top employees. And now I would ask you, how similar are those lists? If they're not very similar, I'd say you have a bit of a homework assignment because you are the average of your 5 closest friends, and improving those relationships will pay many dividends in the long run. Plus, it can really impact your professional success and general happiness at work. And this really comes to building relationships. But I know what you're thinking. If you're thinking that the technologists that were important on your list are not people that you talk to, you may be saying, Kate, that's all fine and good, but the engineers are bristly and they don't really like me. Well, that may be true, but sometimes that isn't true because there's this classic finding in social psychology called the halo effect. And what it means is that our overall impression or feelings about a person and the way they feel about us can be based on one trait about them. So for example, if a person has a really likable personality, you may find all their other qualities more appealing. Similarly, if the person is maybe a little antisocial or rough around the edges, you might feel that they are maybe a little less likable. And so I would question, is what you're feeling dislike, or is it just that you have really different styles? Because a lot of engineers, I think, do. And this was really hit home for me about 2 years ago. I was working with an executive coach. And one of the things that she told me is that, everybody's really different. And so I'd say, when you walk into someone's office, how do you start the conversation? Do you ask them how they are? How's their weekend? Well, I'm not like that. I walk into someone's office, I'm like, here are the 2 things I need to talk to you about, and I'm very, results, 1, 2, 3. But the thing is, this can rub people the wrong way, but moreover, if you're a relationship person, this, constant, by the book, here's my agenda, can rub you the wrong way. And so think about that and see if that is perhaps causing that dissonance between you and the engineers. And if that does happen, don't take it personally, because it may or may not be about you. So let's say you're listening to all this and you're like, Kate, that's really not the case. I've had words with these engineers. We don't like each other. Well, I'm here to tell you you can fix it. Because the key to relationships is that they're like film strips. And every time you interact with someone, it generates a frame. When you hear something about someone, it generates a frame. And the more frames that you have in your film strip, the more authentic you feel about that relationship. And so if you have some negative frames, then it's your job to create positive ones. So you've got to look for common ground. What are some things that you actually do both like, or some projects or objectives that you're both working towards? Think about the future and focus on generating as many of these things as you can. Another great technique is reciprocity. So find a way to do a favor for them or to have them do a favor for you. Reciprocity comes in for all aspects of networking, professional, personal, relationships, everything. And if you felt like, it's very hard to not like someone or not if they've done you a favor. But Ben Franklin, actually, there's this other famous effect called the Ben Franklin effect, and it's actually a pretty neat story. And it's really that if you have someone do a favor for you, it makes them much more likely that they will do another favor for you in the future. And Benjamin Franklin explained this because he had a rival in the Pennsylvania legislature. Ugh, tongue twister for me today. And this legislator had a rare book in his library. So Ben Franklin asked him if he could borrow the book, and then he returned it with a note. And then they ended up becoming great friends, even though they were rivals at the start. And the reason why is that if you do something nice for someone, you get a cognitive dissonance that you must like them or I wouldn't be doing them a favor, but obviously you wouldn't want to say no to a petty favor. So one of the best things you can do if you have one of these engineers that you don't have the best relationships with is ask them to help you. Ask them to explain something to you, or maybe tell you a little bit about what they're doing. It doesn't have to be big. And don't give up, because they say it takes 5 or 6 positive things to counteract every negative thing. So if you have a whole history, you may have a little bit of time before you actually fix that relationship. So in summary, we're going to go through and recap everything we talked about. The first thing is be awesome. Do a great job at your work. Nail your role, your job, your responsibilities, because that's the first step to any sort of success, but also people want to work with other people adding value. Next, become a little bit more well-rounded. Seek to educate yourself and learn more about different areas of the business. One of the best things I did in my career was to step out of my engineering silo and to learn more about the business, and it's really consistently pushed my boundaries and helped make everyone better, and I think that's true no matter what discipline you're in. Don't think about us versus them. You're really one team working towards one goal, and the only way you're going to achieve that success that you thought about at the start of this talk is by working together. And the best way you can help do that is find alignment. Figure out how you can use the same tools, have the same goals, and be working towards a common objective. And do this by building your relationships. Fix the broken ones and make an effort to really bring everything together, technologists and even the really bristly engineers. And as you leave here, just know that in order to accomplish anything, to make that step towards your success is a decision to try. So keep working towards it. And my last and final note is things never to say to an engineer is that it's just a few lines of code, because everything we do is a few lines of code. That's it. Thanks, everyone. I'll take questions if people have it. Okay, that's it. Oh, question. Yeah.
So I am a marketer. My husband's a developer, so this is like pre-marriage counseling. He's currently very frustrated in his role because of the time frame you talked about, where QA will do what they need to do and give the specs back, give the product back to them, but they don't have the time to fix what they found before the business team wants to launch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's something every organization struggles with, because you want to build high-quality things, but you also want to get to market quicker. And I think it really comes down to ROI. So one of the ways that I've used to justify things like refactoring and code quality work is to really justify the cost of doing so. Like, how does it improve maintenance of the code or reduce operations? Or how does it allow us to iterate quicker on new features? Because if it doesn't really have a business impact, then, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't do it anyway. But, I mean, fixing bugs and small things like that, I think it's really easy to make the case around the user experience, too. So I just try to tie everything back to what is it really, how does it help the business? Because I think it's very hard then to argue against it. And sometimes helping the business is also making engineers happy, by the way. And so that can also be a good tool. Other questions? Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you being here, and enjoy the rest of the conference.